I'm excited to be making this video for a couple of key reasons. Number one, this new device is a massive godsend for me that fills a very specific niche that I have been desperately needing, and I'm very happy that there's finally a kind of cohesive solution for a problem that I have, and I think some of you might too. Number two is that I want to talk about the current state of the power meta and how Walrus's power supplies are kind of stacking up in that context. And number three, I really want to kind of spend some time in defense of this guy. So let's get into it. Welcome back to Secret Weapons. My name is Mark Johnston, and if this is your first time here, this is a channel where we do gear demos and reviews, as well as studio tips and tricks on how to level up your writing, playing, and production from the perspective of a guitar player in a home studio. If that's something that might appeal to you, I would love it if you'd hit that subscribe and stick around for future videos. Let's get into it. Today we're talking about the Walrus Audio Canvas Power HP. So let's start by talking about what Canvas Power HP is and why it deserves its own video. Canvas Power HP specifically is the newest offering in Walrus Audio's power lineup, their Canvas Power series, initially launched a couple of months ago with, I believe, the Canvas Power 5, 10, 15, and 22, or 5, 12, and 22. I can't remember the exact kind of like differentiations between how many ports are on each, but suffice to say, it starts at 5 and it ends at your forearm power supply, the Canvas Power 22, with 22 isolated outputs for guitar pedals, including 3 voltage switchable ones, 24 volt in and through for daisy chaining, as well as a little usage meter that tells you how much of your power draw total available you are currently using, and a courtesy USB-C port for things like powering your iPad or any other USB-C powered device, including some smaller synthesizers. This thing is rad. I did a video on it. I'll link to it down below if you want to know more about the rest of their lineup. But in that video, I did a thing to kind of showcase how strong this was. And what I did was plug in as many high draw pedals as I could into this monster of a power supply, chain another supply onto that, and then in turn, chain that into this small wonder right here. For the uninitiated, this is the Chalk's Crux. And what this does is effectively take the output, power output, the 24 volt out at this end from one of your Canvas supplies or a Strymon, Chalk's, or Mono power supply that all use the same 24 volt linking technology, and takes that and converts it into a switchable 9 or 12 volt 3 amp output, basically allowing you to power the Line 6 series, HX Stomp, that kind of thing, the Valve preamps from Victory Amplification, or in my case, the Neural DSP QuadCortex, basically allowing you to power your QuadCortex in a pedal board power environment by linking out to this little guy and being able to kind of like get rid of that old school Neural DSP power supply altogether. Which brings us all the way back around to the Walrus Audio Canvas Power HP. This tiny little power supply right here gives you 3 9 volt outputs at 500 milliamps each, enough to basically power all of your standard go-to Chase Bliss, Strymon, Maris, all of those types of devices, as well as a single 3 amp, once again, switchable between 9 and 12 volt output. This is a standalone power supply that will allow you to power something like the QuadCortex and up to 3 other devices or more if you want to be a little bit janky and do some daisy chaining. On that front, your mileage may vary. And something that I think is important to note as we talk about this device is the fact that things get a little bit more complicated power-wise with the Power HP than your standard pedal board power supply. And that's because we kind of operate on a pretty unified set of power standards for pedals. Generally speaking, there are some 9, 12, and 18 volt options out there, but that's about as complicated as it gets. The power draw stays pretty much the same, and you just kind of have to be careful not to plug in a 18 volt power to a 9 volt pedal, or else you might fry the thing. Because the HP is dealing with a wider selection of devices, because this thing is designed to interface more effectively with a broader set of power requirements, it has a manual that is available on the website that you definitely should be reading, because it comes with a variety of other colored tipped power supplies that plug into this thing. These are going to be for things like your Akai head rush, your Eventide pedals, your Line 6 pedals, that kind of thing. So when you get this thing, if you pick one of these up, make sure that you read the manual on what kind of like colored power tip goes to what kind of device, so you don't fry your really expensive boutique niche thing. And so if you're wired anything like me, at this point your wheels are already turning, because this solves for a lot of problems for a lot of people. And this is not a solution for everybody. If you're not somebody using something like the Victory Amp valve preamps, if you're not somebody who's using a QuadCortex or an HX Stomp or something, this probably isn't super necessary for you. But for me, as you may have noticed, I'm in a new studio now. I used to be working out of my house in a laundry room, essentially, that I converted into a home studio. I now work off-site. I've got a space outside of my house, and at home I have one small corner where I can do writing and pre-production, where I have almost none of my gear. And so this actually shows up at the exact right time in my life, because I now have a pedal board with a QuadCortex, the hologram microcosm, and a Goodwood Audio Audition that I can take home and leave set up at my house for writing, for jamming, for playing, for pre-production, for whatever it is that I need to do, that will also function as my go board for whenever I am traveling somewhere that I need to play guitar. This is the power supply that the larger Walrus Audio Power comes with, and this is the one that the Canvas Power HP comes with. It is obviously smaller. It is also effectively half the power distribution as its larger counterpart. So if you are going to be chaining things together, just be aware that this will give you about half of the total draw across the board that this does. Having said that, in my testing for this guy, I decided to see how extra I could get. And so I actually took the power supply that comes with this one, powered up my QuadCortex, linked it out to the Chalk's Crux, and then powered up in turn the Victory Amps Sheriff valve preamp that I have that requires one of these to be powered on as well. And this thing handled both of those and my hologram microcosm with no problems. So there is no kind of overall power consumption draw on this one like the larger counterparts have, just as there is no USB-C, but for kind of eyeballing the amount of power draw I was actually using, this thing still feels deeply capable for the number of ports it has and its ability to chain out to another very high draw piece of gear. Outside of just being a strong feature set offering for this kind of use case from Walrus Audio, this is also something that rocks because I think that the Walrus Audio Power is really good. And that's not coming from a place of I have one power supply and so I have no reason not to question it. I am something of a power supply junkie in a lot of ways. And I'm being real here, like I have my Canvas Power HP as well as the 22 and the medium-sized Walrus power supplies. I also have my Strymon, this is the Ojai R30, as well as a handful of other Ojais floating around in here. I also have multiple of the recently released mono power supplies that are very good as well. And they all operate on the same kind of 24 volt in and through technology. And I think that the Walrus stuff holds its own against these incredibly well. And all these different power supplies does bring me to a point I want to make. I saw this comment a lot in my previous video on the Walrus power supply stuff, and I really do want to kind of call attention to the fact that I saw a lot of complaining about the brick, the 24 volt brick that operates as kind of the power supply adjacent to the power supply. When Strymon released their small format power, I saw some grumbling that, oh, it's only small format because they moved the transformer and all the information, all the kind of like the heavy duty stuff offsite to this other brick that you now have to contend with as well. And the same thing has been done with the mono power supplies and the Walrus Audio power supplies. And I am unabashedly an advocate for these as a power supply system with these smaller, sleeker, thinner supplies, and here's why. So this is the pedal board that I made for this video and for my kind of like home recording and travel use cases. And one of the things that I love about the Temple boards is the fact that they have these modules on the sides that you can use for kind of routing audio and power in and out from under your board. You've got a little IEC port right here with a power switch on the side and a little dongle that goes underneath. I can link this directly to that brick in whatever convenient spot I want and not have to contend with it aligning or being awkwardly plugged in relative to where I want my power distribution to my pedals to live underneath a board like this. And likewise with a more conventional pedal board like this, kind of like a conventional shape and everything, something like this with a gap in the back or on the sides allows me to take a brick like this and put power on either side of the board that I wanted for easy access, off to the side if I want it over there. These are great because it allows you to kind of like get power to your board on either side, top, bottom, middle, wherever that is actually easiest for you, while then still being able to put your power anywhere that you need it to be underneath so that all of your cables can run as cleanly and as smoothly as possible. Anyways, tangent over about that stuff, but I am a much bigger fan of the separate IEC port and the power distribution itself because I just think it makes for a more convenient, a more flexible, and a cleaner power distribution system under your board, but people can have their preferences. So anyways, there's not really going to be like sound samples for this video because it's just power, but I guess just for the sake of doing so, we will kind of like kill the bed that's playing underneath this right now, and I will show you why my board is set up, how it's set up using this thing, and then we'll also just kind of stretch it a little bit. We'll daisy chain into that valve preamp I talked about to showcase that you can run both a QuadCortex and a valve tube preamp from Victory on this power supply by itself, and then we will in turn probably chain this into a larger power supply and just start plugging things in and see how far we get until the whole thing collapses. I think that might be a fun way to end this video. I hope that's okay, Walrus. If not, sorry, but this thing seems pretty capable, so I have faith. Let's give it a listen, a look, whatever it is. So obviously, like I said, we're not really getting into sound samples here, but I do want to walk through what this board is, why I have it set up this way. So I have the Canvas Power HP as the kind of like center point for this whole rig, and underneath it, under the board, I have the brick that kind of goes to it that feeds to it right here. Power comes in on the side over here with a little switch that allows me to turn it on and off without having to like physically unplug anything. We have the Neural DSP QuadCortex being powered from the high output, kind of like 3 amp out on this thing. And then we are using 2 of the 3 other outputs on the Power HP. One is for my hologram microcosm that is number 2 in the loop, coming from the send and returns in the QuadCortex, and the other one is this Audition. And the idea here is the Audition can send and receive stereo over TRS. It can also send and receive, or send and pass through power. So I have one of these power ports going to the Audition, not because the Audition needs it at all, but because on the other side of the Audition, there's an additional power port right here, where they send and a return that will basically allow me to, if I'm working on demos, if I'm doing pre-production for this channel, or if I just have a piece of gear I want to audition out and I'm not here in the studio, I can easily throw any pedal in the Audition's loop and quickly, without having to change a bunch of extra cables, be able to power it and put it in context of whatever rig I'm running on the QuadCortex, which is really impressive. So this board is going to be a massive lifesaver both for traveling for me as well as home writing, home recording, home pre-production before I come in here to the studio with the camera and actually kind of put things to tape, as it were. So let's go ahead and see what the Canvas Power HP can offer up for us. Like I said, it is offering technically half the power as the larger counterparts that it offers up. So let's see how far we can get with it. We are obviously already powering our QuadCortex, our hologram microcosm, and the Audition. Granted, the Audition is probably pulling like literally 0, I mean not 0, it's pulling 1 milliamp of power, maybe just to like power a tiny LED that's in there, but that thing can operate totally bypassed, like with no power, so it doesn't really count. So let's dig in. So we're gonna start things off by plugging in that Chalk's Crux and powering up that Victory Amps Sheriff like I talked about. It is another high draw 12 volt 3 amp style device. So let's plug it in. And now we are running a entirely analog tube-driven preamp with our QuadCortex and our hologram microcosm. This is also really fun because it kind of gives you some great use cases for this kind of thing. I, in theory, could put this in the loop of my QuadCortex and basically use that as an analog tube amplifier using the QuadCortex for cabinets. And I could use both of those on a single IEC port by using these two things together, which is something that in the past would have required a additional kind of like set of wall warts, a power strip to kind of power multiple things, just more complicated use cases across the board that we can kind of avoid in this context, which is really rad. Let's go ahead and plug in a power supply and just start plugging stuff in and see at what point we can get something to fail. This is my Canvas 15. We're gonna use the 15, not the 22, because we're just not gonna use that many pedals. But I'm just gonna start plugging in high draw pedals. I've got 5 of them sitting here, and we're just gonna start plugging them in and see at what point we are no longer able to power this thing. Say what you will, I'm calling that impressive. To get that far into that with that many devices, and it really not only failing until we hit 2 power supplies and that chocks at the end powering the additional high draw device. And even then, a bunch of it powered back up. Some of the Strymon, or some of the Chase Bliss stuff didn't, just for transparency. The tonal recall red knob did not come back during that kind of big reset that happened, but everything else powered back on. So I'm gonna go ahead and call that shockingly impressive for this new power offering from Walrus. Is this something that you would use? Are you somebody who has a QuadCortex or an HX Stomp or something and has avoided using it because it's inconvenient to power it in a pedalboard context? If that's the case, is this something that you're going to be looking into getting? I would love to know your thoughts on this and anything else in this video in the comments down below. Thank you so much to Walrus Audio for sponsoring this video, and until next time, thanks for watching.